Welcome everyone back to the TFTuesday Podcast. It's your host Zill. I hope y'all have had a great week. The weather has been quite nice where I've been. We've had a lot less humidity, and I am very thankful for that. It means that my fur doesn't poof out whenever I'm TFing. Today, I have a really exciting guest on to chat a little bit about himself and a few fun different topics, including, changing other people and body positivity. So, Ben300, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Ben300, the most original name in the world I know, and I have been I guess more like a generic furry artist these days, but I did start off in this community heavily on the TF side, and still am very heavily on the TF arts, stories and such, and been around for, I think 17 years by now. If we count the early days of just lurking around, I guess it's been 17 years.
Yeah, and you've been doing art for a good chunk of those years too, which has always been nice to see. So, I was interested to know a little bit more about what kind of got you into TF in particular, and like what kind of set you on the path to drawing a lot of TF art online.
Uh, It's hard to remember exactly. To be fair, I think 17 years ago I was kind of interested in a lot of like werewolf movies, if that's like the most generic way to do it. And I kind of remember just being really into those scenes where when the guy turns into the werewolf and whatnot. And I just kind of went looking for those scenes specifically on, I think it was pre-YouTube by that point. So I was like, Google Video or something. And
Oh my gosh.
over time I did find those scenes, but it was also sites that were showing more than just that, like people drawing like transformation themed stuff, transformation themed stories that were specifically focused on that alone. And I was like, this stuff is kind of cool. And I kind of just ended up finding both the entire TF community back in the day and eventually also the furry community as a whole. And then I just bounced from one site to the next. I remember the old days where it was, what's it called? VCL, I think.
Yes, VCL. Oh my
VCL,
gosh.
where I was seeing some of these stuff. I remember, oh god, this is probably going to be very old. The Doc's Lab, I think it was called. It was one of these very early
Oh
sites that
yeah.
was mostly stories. I think there was some art as well.
It's still running.
Does it still run, actually?
It does, yeah, and I don't actually know how often it updates, but I do know that it is still up and there are people who go to it fairly, at least semi-frequently. So,
Talk about a flashback. I think I also remember Transfer. That one I know for a fact it's still going. But yeah, I remember one of the ones I kept checking around, and that's how I found a lot of the artists that I still believe are still creating stuff today. Also, that one site, am I messing up the name? Dragonade?
Dragon Yard,
Yeah,
yes.
Dragonyad. Shadow Lord Inc., I think was what the website is called. That's where I found a lot of, because that's basically just a giant repository of so many transformation themed clips and such, and found that one and found so many things. I was like, yeah, I actually kind of really like this stuff.
Yeah.
And then eventually, I think I started on DeviantArt, mostly writing, because at that time I didn't know how to do art. So I dabbled into writing transformation themed stories, which is also how I learned how to write and speak English, which is kind of funny because I'm not a native English
Oh.
speaker. If my accent doesn't give it away, I'm actually Swiss Italian, so that's that was a thing. So that's how I actually learned how to speak English. That was an interesting way to learn, shall we say?
Yeah.
And then eventually I moved to Fur Affinity, and that's where I spend most of the time. And I still actively post on there. And nowadays it's basically a mixture of Fur Affinity and Twitter, really. And that's where I am. And I still do TF stuff, and yeah, not stopping anytime soon, I say.
Yeah. No, that's great. And honestly, I didn't even realize that you learned English through TF's writing and TF stories. That's honestly really cool. I didn't even think of that as being like a large gateway towards learning a new language. So that's kind of awesome.
It is interesting. It's mostly because I saw those stories back then. I was like, I want to do it too. Obviously, back then my English knowledge was pretty bad. I wouldn't say that I was like relying very heavily on Google Translate, but I was just struggling to put sentences together, so they were probably really, really bad.
Yeah.
If I take away the probably, they were. But but yeah, over time I started to slowly just improve, and also in general, back when I was reading some of those old TF stories, especially on Doc's Lab, I couldn't really understand the whole thing, so I was relying on translations, automatic translation or whatever, and that's how I started to pick up the words and relying less and less on the translator. So in the end, ironically, the getting into TF actually helped me learn a different language, and it became very important because then I moved on to studying computer science, which is entirely taught in English, and yeah, that actually worked well for my career as well.
That's awesome. I can only imagine how much of the material for computer programming is English, considering so much of it is focused on like the American and British audiences.
All of it is.
Yeah. So then you were kind of talking about like, you started with werewolf movies and then you kind of found stuff online, but it wasn't something that like immediately jumped out to you. Would you say there was like a specific moment where the light bulb kind of went off in your head and you're like, oh, TF is a thing and it's a thing that I'm truly into?
It's hard to pinpoint something exact. I can think of a few scenes that I remember from some movies and shows that were that kind of stick out. Like, for example, this is pretty much a classic, American Werewolf in London, that one scene, because it was for one, it was such a really well-made scene, so it will stand out no matter what. Even if you're not into TF and say, as far as horror movie moments, that's like one of the most effective, most memorable scenes in any horror movies, I would say.
Yeah.
And there's several cartoons I can think of. I think American Dragon I was watching around that time. I think probably later as well. But, that's a show whose entire premise is guy can turn into dragon at will. And
Yeah.
they do show the transformation a little bit. I think they kind of turn into a poof thing later on, but still.
Yeah.
Also, yes, Ben 10 as well.
I was gonna ask, you see Ben300, Ben 10 is like something that comes almost immediately to mind.
And ironically, that is not what my name comes from. Like, it doesn't actually come from Ben 10, even though, yeah, you could say transformation alien, that's what it's from, but no, what my name actually comes from is literally just a randomly generated name when I made an email like 17 years ago, pretty much, and I just kind of kept using it out of laziness, but then I just kind of kept it because that's what people would refer to me as. So I said, fuck it, I'll leave it.
That makes sense. That is funny though that like there's kind of that coincidental connection between like, Ben 10, aliens changing, all that stuff, and then you have your name, which was actually kind of just pre-generated, but also in some ways kind of pointed towards that interest.
It's fate.
It was fate, yeah. Computer assigned TF. Yeah, no, it's funny how like small things like that can lead to these destinations that you don't even realize they're gonna head to,
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I think that's cool.
The big domino effect.
Yeah, exactly. So, one thing that I've always really enjoyed about the stuff that you produce is you have like very distinct sona forms, and like in particular there's like three that really come to mind. There's your blue alien species, there's your svelte lady polar bear, and then there's your Barra rat fellow.
Yeah.
So I was curious to know what kind of the source of inspiration was behind each one and what kind of drew you to those specific species and specific body types.
Well, the blue one, which is my alien one, it's the oldest one because I had it pretty much since the beginning. Well, maybe not exactly the beginning, but it's something that I had for a long time. It went through a bunch of iterations because in the early days, I was kind of just... Basically, I just kind of drew a doodle of like the alien from Alien Hominid. I'm sure some people may have made that connection because they see like the jagged mouth and the antennas. And it was kind of a very similar design to that one. Except originally I made it like into a little worm thing. It wasn't even like a bipedal thing. It was just like a naga sort. Not quite.
Gotcha.
To be fair, it was also because at that time I didn't know how to draw for shit. I mean, to be fair, these days not that much. But still, back then I just didn't know. And so I made like the most simple, basic shape that I could. I was like, I'll do this, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But then I kind of, over time, I kind of gave it to other artists. I commissioned other artists and I just told them, can you try maybe making bipedal and see what it looks like? I was like, actually, that looks pretty cool. And I kind of kept it, and it kind of iterated over. Like, originally, for example, he had black eyes and a very round head and exaggerated proportions. Eventually lost the black eyes and got like a more reptilian, regular head. The exaggerated proportions kind of got toned down. And yeah, over time, it just became more and more humanoid. And then I think when it comes to like the build, originally it was meant to be like more regularly, like, I wouldn't say, originally it was slim, then it moved to like more muscular. And then I had Gil Panda draw him once. Mm-hmm. And she basically said, you know what, it would be cool if it was like a muscle gut. It was basically a big muscular top and then like a belly. And I said, yeah, I actually really like that, so I'll keep it. And that's what I kept because I just really like the look and it just feels like, I don't know, it feels right. I think is the best way to put it. So that's how it went for that alien one. The other two was a bit more incidental. The rat... Essentially, one day, because there's this artist that I know called Don Ryu.
Oh, yeah.
That draws a lot of these, like, mean-looking rats. And just out of
Hmm.
basically just for the hell of it, it was taking sketches, I think. And I said, hey, just draw my guy. I basically just gave him like basically a drawing of myself as a human, kind of like cartoonish, whatever. And I
Hmm.
said, make this into one of your like a rat, like a trashy rat in your style. I think that's what I said. And he did. And I looked at it and I said, again, this looks pretty cool. I think I'm gonna elaborate on this. And I don't know, I just kind of connected to that form. And eventually I added also the were rat bit to it because I just wanted like
Yes.
this old TF. I think all three have basically a TF sort of theme going for them.
Yeah.
Eventually I went for the full were rat kind of thing where it's like, hey, you got these introvert human that doing full moon, boom, trashy, annoying, cigar smoking douchebag rat kind of thing. Maybe not douchebag, but kind of this rougher kind of character that kind of contrasts
Yeah.
with the human. And the bear, that was also kind of came out as not really an accident, but one day I was kind of experimenting drawing polar bear characters, and I drew like a this voluptuous like BBW type character,
Hmm.
and basically then Gilpana was taking commission, as I said, and just as a test, I said, do a thing where me turning into that. And she did, and because it's Gilpanda, she drew it incredibly well and put a lot of energy into it, as she does. And
Hmm.
again, I just kind of fell in love with that, and I kept it because it's one thing that allows me to express, I guess, a different side of how I want to express myself, which is the more feminine side, you say. So, I enjoyed the way that looked. I enjoyed that particular theme, and that's why it kind of became something of a recurring character that I can somewhat identify as. Because even though technically I have a decent amount of characters, probably too many, these three
Hmm.
are the ones that I can identify with to some extent.
Yeah. That makes sense. And it's so interesting that in some senses all three of those forms had like collaboration from external artists that you then kind of were like, oh, actually, you know what, this fits me. I really identify with this. I don't think I really heard a story where like many different sonas kind of came into being because other artists took a spin on it and then the person in question was like, actually, this works perfectly. So I think that's really cool.
In my case, I tend to enjoy giving artists that I commission a bit of freedom, and I just want to let them do their thing and see what happens. And in these
Hmm.
cases, yeah, that's kind of what happens with those three. It more or less, it was a back and forth. To be fair, obviously, I was there telling them, kind of giving them directions and see what they would come up. And through an
Hmm.
iterative process, I would say, I ended up gravitating towards these three and the way they look and the lore behind them. Which for all three, there is some TF-based kind of lore going on. Or I wouldn't say lore, more like just sort of the way I see them, kind of the running theme with all three.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Obviously, I very much enjoy when Sonas kind of have like a TFE sort of, not even necessarily the backstory itself has to be TFE, but just having like the TFE sort of vibe. And even though, you've definitely been doing stuff that isn't all just TF focused, it's really
Hmm.
interesting that each of those forms still have like their roots and the vibes of transformation to them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's something that I still really enjoy, so it's gonna be there.
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the fact that they're still kind of there, I think is really cool. And, I was going to ask with your blue alien, when you first came to that form, did you feel like there was no like real world species that could really encapsulate the essence of what he embodied? Or were you just more focused on kind of taking from that source that you took from and put a bit of a new spin on it and then kind of going from there?
Yeah, pretty much. Because I think in the end, it obviously very reptilian in look. Because big
Hmm.
blue. It doesn't have fur. It's kind of got scales. It's got a big tail, and the muzzle is somewhat reptilian. But as far as like real world equivalent, I was just kind of because again, it started from the inspiration of being that little alien hominid style design, and then it kind of progressed and became its own, more or less its own thing. But it wasn't. It's
Yes.
not like a species that it's like from a real world animal. It's not like the other two, which is it's rat, polar bear, and this one is I guess very generically would say it's reptilian, and that's about it.
So, then my next question is between those three forms, there's like a very wide spread in terms of like body shapes and species and gender. So, how does inhabiting each form affect how others like view and interact with you in your experience? Like, do you sometimes get folks who know you by one form and get confused by the other?
I think most people know me mostly for the alien because, well, very broadly, it's just the fact that I use that as the avatar for every social media account I have. Like that's my Twitter icon,
Right.
that's my FA icon, the Telegram, Discord. So when people think of like if they think my name, they think that they don't think the other two. Although there are some people that do refer to me with the other forms, and mainly the polar bear one. Sometimes it's like, "Hello, Miss Glacia." Yeah, but in general, I think the way I see it is that all three represent myself in some capacity. I like to think that they do. But for the most part, as far as people on the internet are concerned and my friends, they will see me always as the blue one because that's the one that I had for the longest time. That's the one that I always use, and I guess that's one that I most often refer to myself in first person because maybe it's a bit confusing when the other two I often can refer to them in third person, especially Glacia because she has a name. It's called Glacia, even
Mhm.
though the fact that he has a different name is more to emphasize the fact that it's kind of two different entities that kind of are sprung from one another, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I feel like when a lot of people talk about their sonas, like sometimes they don't have the same name as the person who is like, identifying with them. And just because they have a different name and you might refer to them in the third person doesn't necessarily mean that they're not still you. Like, I feel like a lot of times when people do refer to their sonas in that way, it's just an easier way to identify linguistically that you're talking about yourself in another form,
Mm-hmm.
be it with a different name and everything else. But I do agree, like it can kind of confuse people because then it's like, what is the line between a persona and an original character that you're just attached to?
Yeah,
And sometimes
exactly.
people don't know the difference.
Mm. That and also when I'm interacting with people online, I don't want to immediately jump into the more role play ish kind of
Yeah.
conversations. Like I don't want to start immediately referring to myself. Hello, I'm a cute blue alien. Ooh woo. I wouldn't even
Yeah.
say that, but because some people just find that a little bit inappropriate. Like, please introduce yourself like a normal person, then we can do the whole uwu awu bibidi bobbidi boop. So
Yeah.
that's I'm
Exactly.
kind of hesitant doing it that way immediately. But of course, depending on who I'm talking to, then I can be more playful and refer to myself, as one of these forms, but specifically the blue one. But there's some people that really enjoy when I'm talking to them as if I was Glacia, my polar bear character.
Hmm. Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And so then my other question in that kind of realm would be, when you are in those interactions where you might be, for example, referring to yourself as Galatia, and like people are interacting back with you in that way, do you find that those kind of social interactions affect how you end up viewing yourself overall? Like not just within that form, but just yourself more broadly. Is there any sort of spillover into how you view yourself in the real world?
Uh, well, the way I do, at least for, well, actually, I think it's different for all three. The way I do it with my blue guy, like, I would say
Hmm.
that my main sona is that I try to just be a gentler kind of version of myself, at least as much as possible. Like, I want to approach other people and try to be friendly and nice to them as much as I can, and just being this kind of welcoming, warm, just nice figure to them. For the rat, the few times that I do, I kind of just play it a little bit more like the what's the best way to put it? Naughty. I don't even know how to describe it. I just kind of become a lot more playful, and I guess I go a little bit more on the naughty side of things because I
Hmm.
kind of design the idea of the rat is the fact that the rat form is kind of this inverse of like the more introvert human, which I see myself as. I consider myself more of an introvert. But yeah, and as for the polar bear, it's just a way for me to express myself in a more feminine way. Which, for the record, in real life, I don't see myself as a feminine individual. I'm not a transgender person. I don't use like neutral or feminine pronouns. I'm perfectly content with being a male and having people
Hmm.
refer to me in, he, him. But at the same time, I do enjoy this kind of, I'm not sure if thought experience is the right term, but just letting myself slip into a feminine role and kind of play the role of like this big welcoming mother figure and be like, here, little guy, I'll give you a nice hug and make everything nice and okay for you. And of course, with the fact that I do enjoy the whole transformation stuff, I do play with the
Yeah.
idea that all of these characters can change other people through various means.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that you are able to kind of play with those forms, but also like it's a way for you to explore something, but it's a way to express yourself, and then you can kind of go back to your quote unquote usual self.
Exactly.
And I think it's really interesting that you're able to kind of explore, like a different side of yourself from a gender perspective while still being very like content in how you identify. Because
Yeah.
I think that that's the mark of someone who's like really thought about these things and like come to a very good understanding of
Yeah.
themselves.
It's basically the reason why all three have this idea that you're always going back and forth between being human and being that form. Like in the case of the alien, the thing that I always do with the alien is the fact that because he has to live in secret among humans, he's always disguised as one. Like it turns into
Hmm.
something to a human, like fully.
Yeah.
And also, I have this little thing where the disguise is always a piece of garbage that never works, and he keeps turning back at the worst moments, and you have to memory wipe everybody all the time. Because that's just kind of funny. I always like to play with this kind of hilarious motif thing. And for the
Yeah.
rat, of course, it's the full moon thing. Here comes the full moon. You're gonna change it. There's nothing you can do about it. Deal with it. And for
Yeah.
the polar bear, it's a magical necklace that you can just slip on anytime you want, and it's completely in your control. And just really want to sit back and relax, put it on, become that, and feel perfectly content. Because I kind of view that character as like being this super, super chill, chill. I wasn't even trying to make a pun. I just realized I said
No,
that.
it's perfect. I love puns.
It's the chill. It's the super peaceful, like super chill thing that you turn into when you just want to relax. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's why I have that because I really love that idea. I love the idea that you're perfectly in control and beside the alien, but that's a different kind of control. It's more like you're in control to an extent, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And, I thought it was really interesting that you mentioned that with all of your different forms, you do like the theme of changing other people, because it's definitely something that I have noticed within the art that you produce in general. Like, it's a theme that comes up a lot. And I think it's kind of unique that you usually change others through like magic powers or like triggers that you yourself are kind of setting off. So I was curious to know a little bit more, kind of dig in a little more as to where that kind of desire to be in control of the changes comes from and why you enjoy changing others as well as yourself.
Well, for myself, I think I just said it. I just enjoy the idea that you have this kind of control over it, at least partial. Obviously, because when you talk about the rat, it's a aware thing, so full moon, and you don't really control the full moon. At least
Hmm.
normally don't. And the alien thing, it's like semi-random when everything breaks down. But as for changing other people, I think all of the three can do that. The way I see it, the alien can do it through technology. Like I have this
Hmm.
running gag where he has like this very old 1970s style alien like ray gun, and he just shoot it at people and he changes them, and he keeps having to test it out. So fun times be had.
Amazing.
The wear is the usual thing: bite someone and they turn, or other means. And with the polar bear, I kind of just assume that she has magical capabilities in that form, and as a result, she can just like wiggle her finger and be like, "Woo, now you're gonna turn." And I do enjoy the fact that you have that option because, for one, it's fun just to get commissions together. Get a commission with someone
Oh,
else and get drawn together, and you're both changing and sharing this, sharing the transformation. Because the way I prefer them is that they are seen as a good thing. They're like wish fulfillment. I want to turn into something that I desire to be and something that is what I want to be, yada, yada, yada. And as a
yeah. Hmm.
result, I like the idea that you can share this with other people and it's a joy to share it. I like the fact that you can just give it to someone else. Like someone really wants to be this thing, and I can provide, and I can just watch them as they change, and they're happy about changing, and at the end they're looking at themselves and they're like, man, this is beautiful. Thank you. It's just
Hmm.
a nice theme for art, for stories, and just a good, happy thoughts, I can see in more generic terms.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And, it's interesting because a lot of the TF media that's kind of out there, generally when transformation is brought into play, obviously there is definitely examples of it where it's like, a willing thing, be it, like a witch or a wizard who like is able to control their own forms or yada yada. But oftentimes the context in which we see TF is through things like horror movies. And so oftentimes those movies and situations are not ones in which the person actually going through the changes wants to be going through them. So I think it's really interesting that you focused more on this helpful wish fulfillment kind of side because it runs counter, I think, to a lot of the different transformations that you do see at least in popular media.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
it's interesting that you've kind of focused on helping others by creating kind of this nice environment for them to go through and kind of self-actualize to what they want to be.
Yeah, exactly. Because, like you said, in traditional media, whenever there's one of these a transformation being portrayed, like if you go back to the werewolf, for example, in general,
Hmm.
guy turning into a werewolf is a bad thing because it's like they turn into a monster that they lose control over, and it's a bad thing because they could hurt people and yada yada yada, or it's a curse.
Right.
I think, but it's not even like popular media. So some of the oldest myths that we know are like that, like the story of King Lycan, for the werewolves came from, sort of,
Yep.
at least the name. It was about someone being cursed into a wolf form because I'm trying to remember exactly. He served the flesh of his own children to the gods, I think, for the case of Lycan.
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
Trying to remember the one about the guy the lady getting turned into a swan. I forgot which one, what that is. But it's also that was seen as a
Oh,
punishment.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, that was a punishment
you know,
one.
Kafka's Metamorphosis, where guy gets turned into a cockroach, which was a
Hmm.
punishment, and also some big allegory about the working class. But it's not,
Yep.
never portrayed as a good thing. It kind of depends also on what they're getting turned into, but that's generally how they see it. Like becoming something other than human is not a good thing because humans are like being put on a pedestal for the most part.
Right.
But I feel like at least for the people that are listening to this podcast that are into the TF scenes online, in the furry community in particular, they tend to play it mostly as a good thing, as like a sort of wish fulfillment to an extent. Obviously, I can't speak for everybody. I know there's a lot of people that do TFs in different contexts. Obviously, people write stories where it is used also as a punishment, where someone
Hmm.
gets turned into something like, haha, point and laugh. Now you're screwed. Uh, but like I said, the way I like them is the more wish fulfillment aspect of it. It's like it's something that I can look at and see myself in and be like, this is something that I would enjoy. Also, I like to think that the other people that I can change, at least in terms of in the in art form, that is, it's something that they would enjoy. Like I don't do things that where I'm forcing someone and I trying to portray it as something very bad. I do like enjoy semi-unwilling things, like I need to test the alien ray gun and turn someone into something because I need to see if it works, and it's semi-unwilling, but I never portray it in like a overly serious, mean-spirited way. I keep it
Yeah.
a nice, light-hearted tone where it's kind of comedic, and then the person at the end is like, "Hey, this is actually kind of cool. Okay, I'll keep it."
Yeah, and I really appreciate that approach because these pieces that you do just have this very nice, friendly vibe of helping the person along through their changes. And it's interesting that you kind of approach these things as like kind of being a helpful influence, I would almost say, of like either self-actualizing, like you said, or running through these wacky testing thing. Oh, well, you're here, and I'm gonna just see how this works. But then the person's actually chill with it at the end. Like you said, like a lot of transformation mythology and such is rooted in the almost superiority of the human, and therefore becoming something else is seen as like demeaning, and there's a very much a humiliation kind of lens that runs through it. And so
Hmm.
to kind of approach it from a more nurturing, friendly, wish fulfillment vibe, I think runs counter to a lot of what you see, at least in media. And I agree, I do think that there's a lot of people who do approach it from that lens online, at least more commonly. But I think something that has always really stood out about your work for me is that really friendly, helpful influence vibe, particularly with your polar bear form. I find that there is a large emphasis on just making people content and happy, and it's really nice to see, I think.
Exactly.
So, one of the other things that I've always thought is kind of fascinating is that people will often talk about this kind of, I guess, divide between people who like to TF others and people who want to be TF'd. Like the most common classic way is you'll see someone pop into like a group chat and they'll be like, "Oh, does anyone RP? I want to be TF'd by someone or something." And I always find that divide very interesting, given that I don't really subscribe to it because I can enjoy both. And so I know, as you yourself, someone who also enjoys both, what do you think of that dichotomy? Like, is that too simple for most people? Do you think it's generally viewed as a more nuanced kind of topic?
To be honest, this is not something that I've seen nearly enough to say that, like, most of the time, at least the people that I know, they do enjoy both aspects of it. In general, they tend to favor the being turned aspect because a lot of the
Yeah.
people that I know really enjoy the whole I can portray myself turning into something, and I look at it and I enjoy it. Like that's kind of how I do it when it comes to whenever I commission someone, for example. I'm not gonna hide it. It's just that whenever you have the human there that looks a specific way, it's because it looks like me in real life.
Yeah.
Because I like to look at the art and kind of project and see that this could be me, and I can enjoy seeing it that way. And a lot of people that I know are that way as well. That's why so many times when they get art of a transformation, the human is always some kind of, it looks like them. That's pretty much what I'm trying to say. But there are also those that really enjoy the other part, which is turning other people. But to be honest, in general, oftentimes whenever I see someone turning someone else, it's usually an artist that draws commissions, and as a result, they kind of use this theme because people commission them for transformations, and sometimes they have their own character or sona doing the act. I don't know how much they personally enjoy the whole turning other people beyond just the fact that they do it for, commission work and such. And in general, when I see people that like want to turn other people, they do it because they like writing stories, for example. And in general, when in storytelling, they use it, there's various ways they use it. It's either, again, they play the wish fulfillment aspect again, or they do play a whole story where the TF is a punishment.
Right.
Yeah, there's different ways they approach the way they want to portray the transformation, the tone they want to give it. So, yeah, I don't know about the dichotomy, to be honest. Like, at the end, most of the people that I know are into the whole getting transformed bit, while the people that are into transforming other people, they either like it at the same time, like I do, or oftentimes I see them as artists and writers that have to write for other people. So, I don't know, maybe it's something that it's worth asking people a little bit more sometimes, especially the artists that do it a lot, or the writers that do it a lot.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great point, because now that I do think about it, there are a lot of situations in which within the art that is within our community, it is often like the person who is being commissioned doing the changes. And I hadn't really thought about it in that way. So I think that's a really good point. I guess it is rare to some degree to find people in the TF community who are they enjoy TF, but they don't enjoy TFing themselves at all and only like TFing other people. I have definitely met people like that before, but it's definitely true that they're far less common. And like thinking about myself personally, I'm definitely the type who does like seeing themselves change and also help other people change. So, I guess then one of the eternal questions then is, when you are someone who does like changing other people, oftentimes there can almost be like an onslaught of people who want to talk to you in some degree, because it's like, oh, I want to be TF'd and I know this person is into TFing others. And it can be a little bit frustrating sometimes because we all have a shared interest in a specific topic, but sometimes people will try to seek out others for like the fulfillment on their end. So I guess this is kind of a roundabout lead up to a question, but how can we kind of nurture a more nuanced view of the interplay between two people during a TF? Because I often feel like people default to this view of like one person is TFing and the other one is making them change. But oftentimes all of our interests lie somewhere in the middle, and it can be a little bit difficult to navigate those kind of interpersonal conversations and relationships when people are viewing them strictly in a one person is doing the changing and the other person is changing themselves.
Honestly, I would just say let's all change together, because yeah, for real though, one of the things I do a lot and I really enjoy is when it's two people both transforming, and well, maybe the trigger is not something that one or the other is doing, but it might be something that they're both doing at once, like they're like fiddling around with like a magical artifact together, or well, with the wear stuff, it's pretty easy. It's like someone bites the other person as they begin to transform, and that instantly infects them, because let's pretend that how that works.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the other way to infect someone that is a lot more pleasant and less involving teeth or fangs.
Yes.
And
getting down and dirty.
Yeah, just both of them are transforming at once and sharing the feeling, sharing the joy of it, if you want to go it that way. Instead of just doing the full, like someone is causing it and the other person is just there and transforming, and the other person is like watching, or, well, to be fair, it kind of depends on the means. Some people do the thing where it's like, I trigger the transformation, then I sit there and watch and do nothing, because I was like, okay, how long is this going to take? Is it done? Which, yeah, kind of enjoy the ones where the person is a little bit more involved, like they're like touching them. It's like, was going to use the word flesh crafting, but that's a little bit sounds a little bit nastier than it is. But the one where someone's like touching someone or like shaping them, and
Yeah,
it's a lot more
molding them,
involved.
yeah.
But yeah, I do like. I don't know how to solve the dichotomy, so to say, but I do think someone wants to enjoy both the act of transforming someone else and transforming themselves. Become aware anything and just bite them before it starts, and that will do it.
That is a very convenient solution, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of come up with so many scenarios and ways of things that can work with these, because at the end of the day, we can just pretend anything can happen, anything is possible. So whether it's like infectious love kisses, technology, magic, artifacts, moon, trying to think of other random things that are very uncommon. Being somewhere, like cursed places,
Yeah, cursed places. That one I really like, honestly.
Yeah, me too. Oops, we stumbled upon a weird temple. How do we get out? Why am I growing a tail and 3 arms?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh no, whatever shall we do? I guess we'll have to quote unquote suffer
I guess
now.
we'll live
Like, what
here
a
now.
terrible
Oops.
fate. Oh no.
Or they just go, oh no, wait, I guess we live here now. Wait, we do live here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all. Yeah, you can definitely go in and talk about the whole mind TF thing. It's like, it's just body
Yeah.
is also mind.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much to be said there, honestly.
And you can probably spend hours just on that, because that gets
Oh yeah.
very multifaceted.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think just going back just to kind of tie a nice bow on the changing others topic, I think that everything you said makes a lot of sense, particularly with regards to having those interplays that don't necessarily have a power dynamic at play of like, two people just changing together and undergoing the same thing. And it's not even necessarily caused by an external person. It's in fact just an object or a place or just some sort of ephemeral thing that is having an influence.
Or the always fun, it's happening at random, there is no trigger, it just happens.
Yes, that one too. I do really enjoy that, and frankly, sometimes when you're getting a commission, it's like, especially after you've gotten a few, it's like, I don't know what the trigger is. It's just
No, it just
happening.
happened.
So
You're just walking down the street and suddenly, boom.
yeah, suddenly I am a pool toy. Like why? I don't know. That's just it that day. I don't know.
Because it's summer and there's a pool. Yeah,
Yeah.
it just happens.
It just happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think it's really cool that you described it that way. And I definitely think that, when we talk about discussions around interplay within two different people in a transformation situation, I hope that people are more open to things that fall outside of a power dynamic, because I think it can be really nice to enjoy transformation with a friend without having to kind of map almost like to use a bad example, like without having to map almost like a BDSM version of like a top and a bottom on Twitter, like a dom and a sub onto it. Like it doesn't have to be that way. And obviously there's a lot of fun that you can do in terms of exploring that, particularly if it's like, oh, it's the sub who's doing the transformation.
I
But
mean, I've seen plenty where someone is doing the whole BDSM style act where it's like, now you shall become this. I think there's like
yeah.
I forgot which artist did that, but it was like one was a magician and one was the apprentice, and the apprentice was like, instead of pulling the rabbit out of the hat, you become the rabbit. And
Yeah.
all the other things, because why not? I can.
Yeah, I love that stuff. And yeah, to be clear, I'm not shitting on that in any way because I very much enjoy it. But
And so do I, to an extent.
yeah, I hope people continue to expand their horizons, keep an open mind, because there's so many other possibilities that you can have within transformation. And I think that you've definitely shown within your art that there's another way to navigate that. So I think that's cool.
I don't think I'm particularly special in that regard, but I like to push that very hard. I mean, when I
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of kind of like pushing boundaries to some degree, one of the things I've always really appreciated about your work is that it really focuses on like uplifting larger figures during TF and kind of celebrating their bodies as their change. Like your art really does kind of emphasize how beautiful and sexy they can be. And so I was curious to know what kind of initially drove this focus into specializing into more like voluptuous forms within transformation.
I can be lame and just say because I find them really nice. But I think in terms of like the way you can portray a transformation scene, when you have like a smaller figure that becomes a really large one, there's a lot more you can play around. You can show like the muscles growing larger. You can show like getting a belly and it just goes whoop. And yeah, when you're doing that, it kind of gives you like it makes for a much nicer scene as opposed to like everything kind of just remains an even ground. Plus, there's a lot of people enjoy, for example, like clothes ripping apart. So when you grow, it just goes like trip and just opens up. And so yeah, I do enjoy that aspect also personally. That's just the kind of bodies that I really enjoy, and that's why I gravitate towards. But in general, it's not like it has to be only that way. And something that I really do want to do is explore more different setup. How do you start and how do you end? I guess you can say, because it can go the other way around. It could be like a muscular, very masculine-looking male human character that goes for like a more feminine look in the end, like I don't know, cute bunny, for example. That's something that I never actually tried, but something that I should try sometime, where I take either myself or someone else and do the transformation where it just becomes like a more gracious, very slim, very slender body, starting from something larger, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that would be fun too. And I think the reason why I kind of key in on this is because oftentimes there are very like specific forms, I guess for lack of a better term, that you'll see in TF. So like the classic one, and again, I like this kind of TF too, so I'm not like yucking anyone's yum, but like, you have like the skinny dude like pre-TF, but then it's like a buff one like after going through the TF. And like that can be fun, but I think one thing that I've really noticed with your stuff is that you don't like restrict yourself to just those kinds of like, I guess, stereotypical starting and end points. And so I think it's really interesting that you kind of gravitated to it just because you like it, which I think is a completely valid reason for being into it.
hmm Yeah, exactly. Even the whole, it starts off with this kind of like slim human dude. I mean, obviously, when I get a lot of my, specifically the commissions that I get, for example, like I already mentioned, the human that you see there, it's kind of meant to be myself to an extent. In real life, I
Yeah.
am somewhat slim, the best way to put it. Maybe not so
Oh
much
yeah.
these days, but that's often the TFs you see when I get them, because it's always been to me turning into something else, and that's what I go for. But when I change other people, then yeah, I have friends that have their human alter ego for the transformation they get portrayed as. They have different shape, like different bodies that they start off with. Like several of my friends, for example, are a little bit bigger, and they're perfectly fine being portrayed that way in TF, because they also, at least one of them, I know for a fact, that really enjoys going even bigger. So it's like start big, become bigger, for example. And
Yeah.
by all means, it makes for obviously we're talking specifically just purely the aesthetic of the body, because obviously there's more than just the way someone looks. But when you're talking about like the scene being portrayed from a visual standpoint, you can play around a lot with where you start and where you end. And I think it's fun to portray in different ways, like because it just makes for some interesting shots, interesting like views, interesting way you can portray like each part as it changes. And that's why I enjoy just exploring as much as I can. Obviously, again, when it's me, but I try to do it for other people as much as possible, and I welcome like more options there as well to explore, and I do want to do more in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very good point to make as well that, a lot of the TF art content that we see is oftentimes like people portraying themselves in a form. So obviously, like,
hmm
I also have a slimmer form in real life and as seen in a lot of the art I commission and also like put myself in through photo manipulation. So yeah, like obviously that I think is completely understandable and I
Yeah.
am very much in that boat. But I always think that it's nice when people feel comfortable portraying themselves in the bodies that they have or the bodies that they want, and then playing around with different figures because I generally find that our community is a bit more open-minded when it comes to like different forms, different shapes and sizes for people. But I think there's always progress to be made. And so when I see an artist such as yourself who has definitely like put a large emphasis on, kind of pushing those boundaries either consciously or otherwise, I think it's really interesting to talk about because I feel like we don't always talk about these topics, at least openly or in a very conscious way. And so whenever we can make time to talk about those things, I think it's beneficial for everyone in general because everyone should be able to TF and explore whatever bodies
hmm
that they have or want to have. And all of those forms are, can be appreciated for what they are and
hmm
not have to be like minimized or any way.
Plus, there's also, I think one thing I forgot to mention is the fact that the form also can speak to the character beyond just the
Yes.
aesthetic of it all. Like when you have,
Hmm.
for example, this is very classic, for example, for werewolves. Usually it is like a very slim, like normal looking human dude that becomes like usually werewolf forms of these very massive muscular things. And
Yes.
it kind of works also in the idea the werewolf is seen as this like the more beastly, just primal kind of creature. So when you like portray something where you have the human that's like small and then you have the werewolf like big and large, it just kind of also speaks to what kind of personality shift you get in the TF. Like for example, even with my rat, it's like again the human starts slim and the rat is a little bit more buff and large and has this. Most of the times it's always portrayed with this very pompous kind of stance. Because I also like to think that post the change, you go from like an introvert kind of shy dude to this really extrovert, really in your face kind of character, which would work on TFs as well for any kind of things. Like when you show like a more voluptuous kind of female character, starting from like a male human, for example, you get this sense that it's a lot more free, kind of. I'm not sure what the best word for it is, but you get what I mean. It's it
Yeah.
speaks a lot about the personality as well, beyond like the way their physiques look, the way they stand, the way they express themselves post, like even just the expression that they have. Like you go from like this scared looking one, and then the werewolf with a big grin on his face.
Yeah, no, there's definitely an element of matching the form to the personality in some ways. And like
Mm-hmm.
you said, when you think about things like a grinning buff werewolf, like the buffness almost feels like it's enhancing the smugness to some degree. So it really does depend on what the end point is in terms of not only the species or character, but also what their personality is.
Yeah, exactly. Like a lot of these BBW type character bodies, for example, it kind of has always come with this sort of motherly, welcoming kind of presence. Obviously, not
Mhm.
all the time, but at least for example, my character and a lot of the ones I've seen, that's one kind of the impression that you get in a lot of cases.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that I have seen those two things connected before many a times in art, and that's definitely not universal. Like there can also be BBW characters who are none of those things, and I think that's also
No,
entirely
absolutely.
valid and great. Like I do like big woman who's just here to fuck you up too, but I think it's really interesting that in some ways that has been a way to kind of enhance just the suite of options when we think about body figures and such within the realm of transformation. And
Hmm.
so then I guess, I was curious to ask if you have any thoughts as to like other ways we can kind of ensure that our TF art reflects everyone. Like how as we as a community can we continue to kind of uplift people of all sizes through TF? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think the most that we can do is just constantly explore new ways, basically different species, different forms for the humans, and just in general, like just go wild instead of sticking to the same things all the time. So different type of human, different genders, ethnicity, even. Just make sure that someone can find like if there's a specific transformation piece you want to see, like a story is being told or a piece of art being seen for a certain species or a certain person changing, that someone can probably look it up and see it and enjoy it and identify it with somewhat. Because if you're talking specifically the whole wish fulfillment aspect of it, where you're looking at
Yeah.
someone and you're saying, I wish I was that person. If you can you know be able to provide different pieces that can somewhat at the very least allow people to identify themselves with the person being changed, then that's going to be great. Because obviously you will never be able to get exactly that will please everybody. Because at the end of the
Right.
day, if someone wants a specific thing, at that point they will have to find an artist to draw it themselves. I mean, I find an artist to draw it or draw it themselves and learn how to draw, and that's work. So I guess in that case, we can just say we need more people to draw three TFs, or write about TFs, because you can always use more TF artists. And to be fair, it's funny that so many artists that I commissioned in the past that were not explicitly TF artists were more than willing to try these themes and did a pretty damn good job. So I guess in a way, just if you find an artist and you want to commission something TF themed, just ask them if they do it, and they actually might. Hell, they might actually discover that they really enjoy it. Because God, there was this one artist a while back, which unfortunately she's not really doing art on FA anymore because she's working in the gaming industry these days. But she wasn't a TF artist. But then I commissioned a TF art piece from them, and she started doing more and more because everybody suddenly wanted it because she was doing a good job at them.
Yeah.
So hey, who knows? Just go bother everybody about TF art.
Yeah. Which artist was that? Now I'm curious.
Well, I can say it out loud. It's an artist called Boris Menta on for Affinity.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I think I've
I,
seen your commissions from her
yeah, I
before.
commissioned a few pieces in the past. Like I said, she hasn't done anything on FA in a long time because she's working as one of the artists for a game, and
Hmm.
I'm not gonna cite the game just in case
Yeah, yeah.
there might be some. But I don't. But I think she was advertising it on her pages. So if you look up that artist, you probably find also what game she's working on. No, yeah, it's a shame that she's not doing this anymore. But obviously, I cannot go around and force people to do that if they don't want to or they are busy because
Yeah.
everybody can do what as they please with their time in their lives. But like I said, it's nice if we get more people drawing TF stuff, and the artists that have never done it before, they might be willing to try and maybe enjoy it, and there is a market for it because
Oh
from
yeah.
what I've seen, if someone starts doing TF stuff and they do it well, whether it's a writer or an artist, there will be people that will be more than willing to give them work. So
Oh yeah.
absolutely.
100%. The number of times I've seen like an artist who has like at least already some sort of following who's like posted a TF piece and then like all of a sudden that piece has like a bunch of likes and all these retweets and there's like a rush of like followers. I feel like sometimes almost the artist is like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize this was like such a thing." And then everyone is there kind of like,
Yeah, you open Pandora's box, mate.
yeah. It's true. There is an element of be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, the genie's out of the bottle. You ain't putting it back in.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I always think it's really neat when artists who haven't done transformation art before do like a piece or two and then are like super good at it and then also are also like, oh, actually I do enjoy drawing this. So it's always nice to see and obviously not every artist is open to that, but the ones who are, I think it's always really great to get new people drawing within that sphere because then you also get a variety of, takes on transformation in general that, we as a community might not even think about. Like I've definitely seen it where like someone comes in and they're like, "Oh, transformation. I would think about it in this way." And it's like completely counter to like what the like consensus is. But then you stop and you go, "Huh, interesting. So someone who's not immersed in the community thinks about it in this way. That's really interesting. I'd like to
Hmm.
know more about that." So I always like it when that happens.
Yeah, pretty much.
And so then, speaking of like things that are fun to do within transformation and, new perspectives, I was curious if, you as an artist have kind of dabbled in different formats. So you've did a bit of writing, you've done drawn art, of course, you've even done photo manipulations. I was curious as to how, you find that the format of the art piece that you do changes the art piece itself. Like, are there specific themes or scenarios that you find lend themselves well to a specific medium?
Well, I can speak for a lot of experience because I don't do these nearly as much, especially when it comes to like the longer formats like stories and sequences, for example. What I can think of in that regard is simply the fact that when you're going to do like a transformation scene drawn, for example, if it's a single thing, like a single image, it's different than what you want to do if you want to tell a story or draw a comic or a sequence. Because I mean, with a single image, you have to portray like the transformation in a single thing. You have to do like ideally, you want to do like a mid transformation thing where it's like in the middle, so it portrays very well the mid state of that. Some people
Right.
like also do the immediate aftermath, but in general, I think when you want to properly label it TF, you just do something in between. So you just have to portray like one specific scene and get the exact same, like the right moment. When you do a
Right.
sequence, you can you can do it different ways, but you're doing the whole thing, going from start to finish, and you have to approach it differently. You have to set up the scene, or like ideally, you want to set up the scene. You want to do all the in betweens, know what to focus on, what each stage is going to look like, and yeah, it's a little bit harder. And if you're doing a comic, a lot of the time you just want to have a setup first, then go through the scene, then maybe an aftermath, and you're trying to tell a story at the same time. And if you're writing a story, well, telling a story, you have to go through the whole process. So yeah, you do have to approach it differently, and one or the other lends himself better to, for example, having a narrative attached to it. Because
Right.
oh boy, there's one thing that you have to be careful when it comes to TFs. Is like if you don't have the space to really come up with an interesting narrative, then you should probably. It becomes difficult to like portray a scene. Like if you want to, for example, do a scene that tells a story at, like you're doing a single image, for example, like what's causing the
Yeah.
TF? Like how do you show it? If it's like a cursed object, you put it on the ground next to the person. It's like, is that the object? You make it glow. Well, if you do a comic, you can show like the guy picking up the object, and the object is like, I don't know, burning their hands or something like that. I don't know, just
Yeah,
coming up stuff on the top of my head. So I guess in that sense, like there's a different degrees of freedom in how you can portray the scene, tell the story behind it, and just how much you can get, how much enjoyment you can get out of seeing exactly the full thing happen. Personally, I do really enjoy sequences in comics because it shows the whole thing, the whole shabam, every detail. But obviously, I recognize that that's a lot of work. It's something that not many people can even do because I cannot really see myself doing comics because I just don't know how to frame stuff or lay out and stuff. But yeah, I guess I'm not sure if that even answered it because it was kind of rambling, but that's how I see it.
yeah, no, I think that makes sense to me. And, I definitely think that, like you said, when you're talking about a specific singular image, it can be really difficult to communicate everything that you might want to if you're trying to kind of show a narrative behind it. So, like you said, with like showing a cursed object or like even just kind of showing in some way what caused the TF itself. And also, the balance between like if you're trying to show it's a TF, like do you actually do it mid TF? Or like you said, some people will do immediate aftermath, and so it's focused on like the post TF reaction and such. It can be difficult to build a narrative in just that one encapsulated art piece unless you have, for example, text description to go along with it or some other way to kind of convey to the audience what is going on and what sort of themes and other things they should focus on. Obviously, with pictures, you can be very detailed in terms of presenting a visual image to people, whereas obviously writing, you have to go a bit further in terms of like,
Yeah, you
making sure you're
definitely,
describing
writing
everything.
is
But
something you need to be really good at if you really want to portray the scene and describe it in a way that someone can just close their eyes and imagine it properly, which
yeah, exactly.
it's surprisingly difficult. People that write TFs and writers in general, honestly, in the community as a whole, are way underappreciated in my opinion because like anyone can write stuff because there's a much lower barrier for entry in my opinion than stories. Sorry, art. Because
Yeah.
to draw, I mean, technically anyone can draw, but to even get something halfway decent, you need to sit down and actually understand, like, at least the very basics of, anatomy, how to, make the picture look good with, like, line arts, colors, shading, background, perspective,
Yeah.
and all that. Like, there's a lot that you need to even know in order to get something halfway decent. But writing, as long as you can write, like, you understand the English language or whatever language you want to write in, you can get something out and it will probably read okay. But to truly get something that is like really nicely done, like when you can, like I said, close your eyes and really imagine the scene because it's incredibly well described really well and you can really set the scene and make your imagination go wild. That takes skills. And I think some people don't get nearly the credit they deserve for just being able to pull that off so effortlessly.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I know that one of the focuses kind of on our season this season has been to have more TF writers on because I just think that like you said, they are underappreciated to some degree, and it takes a lot of skill to be able to describe things in such a way that you can, like you said, close your eyes and almost imagine the scene. So because there is in some way a lower barrier of entry, I always encourage people to take a stab at it. But yeah, it takes a long time to get to the level of skill as, for example, some of the guests you've had on the podcast, like I wouldn't even know where to start to get to their level. So I always have
Yeah,
an immense respect for them and their craft in terms of writing things.
exactly.
Yeah. So then, thinking about TF themes and scenarios more broadly, I've obviously talked a little bit about some of the themes that I've kind of pulled out from your work, but I was curious if you think there's any TF themes or scenarios that you really like that you don't often see portrayed in art and wish that there was more of.
Rats, all the rats. Okay, that's too easy. It's hard to say because when I think of a lot of themes that I enjoy or that I can think of that needs to be more that I want to find, I tend to find them. Obviously, I don't like have super mega duper specific scenarios that I absolutely couldn't possibly find unless I was like directly asking someone to do it or doing it myself. Because for the
Right.
most part, I do tend to enjoy a lot of things and a lot of themes, and those tend to be portrayed a lot, like from your traditional were creature TFs to the more like based on objects, based on magic, unwilling, willing, semi-unwilling, and stuff. You can find them all more or less. So there's
Right.
always someone that does them to some capacity. Maybe I could say that it would be cool to see people exploring more lesser known creatures to turn people into, like someone that lately goes and puts a giant list of every animal they can think of in a hat and just pulls a random one, and they don't get like your typical ones. Like you see a lot of dragons, you see a lot of like wolves, werewolves, and such, but you get something like a capybara, just to name a random animal. Just try
Yes.
it for the sake of it, just to see what happens. Or go for like characters in from specific shows, or maybe less known one. Like everybody knows a lot of the big Digimons, but you can take like some more obscure ones and try those.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like I think especially when it comes to like Digimon and Pokemon, there are specific ones that people will always gravitate to, but like, for Pokemon there's over 900 of them. I don't recall off the top of my head how many Digimon there are, but there's a lot of those too, and there's like interesting fodder in there for TF that some of them I haven't even seen before. And it's definitely possible that it exists out there, but like where's my Chimicho TF, for example? Like there's so many like different and interesting species that I feel like could be explored there in
Yeah,
in both camps.
like obviously the ones that are popular for obvious reason. Maybe because they just
Of
give
course.
the right vibe. I mean, how many times you see like a transformation, specifically transgender type TFs with Salazzle, the big lizard one.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it has a very curvy form, and it's a Pokemon that described that being 100% female. So, and also makes an harem, like just gets all the males under a
Yeah,
wing. Like that's basically fodder for like a million things. So
yeah.
there's that. You got your classics. Like even in the Digimon side, you get Renamon a lot, you get Guilmon a lot, and for obvious reasons.
Mhm.
But yeah, let's just try to explore more things, even for the fun of it, just to see what you can pull off and try to pull off a scene like that. Sometimes even for a challenge, like the so-called cursed TFs or the forbidden TFs, as you would
Oh
say,
yeah.
where you just take something that's completely out there and try to make it work. And maybe it doesn't work, but at least it might look funny. So
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree.
turn someone into an ice cream cone.
You know what? I would love to see that. If someone did an ice cream cone TF, either the real thing or the Pokemon, I would be very interested to see that.
I'm gonna get really drunk and try, and no promises.
If you do, I would love to see that.
Oh boy, I need to be really drunk for that. But
Yeah.
but still.
Yeah. And in terms of, I guess, like we talked a bit about the species there, but are there any like scenarios in particular that you wish there were more done of? Like, for example, when I think of scenarios, a lot of the ones I default to are like, the common ones. There's like under a full moon for weird TFs. In terms of like donkeys, like everyone goes to like Pleasure Island. With pigs, a lot of the times it's like Cersei's Island. Are there any like scenarios or like locales that you wish were shown more often in transformation pieces?
Well, one that I do a lot and I kind of enjoy for various reasons is the whole person gets turned as an experiment or as like a whatever in front of other people in some capacity. I think I've done that a few times from other artists. And even the whole, I think one of the more recent one I got is literally just like me pretending to transform in front of a webcam. Like, hey,
Oh
look,
yeah,
hey,
yeah,
dude, check this out. Do you enjoy this? Something like that. I kind of enjoy I guess you can call it voyeurism to an extent, but
yeah.
or also when it's someone turning someone else in front of other people, and it's kind of like we're gonna present this transformation. Please observe, and then they're like putting it in this semi-embarrassing spot, but not like in a mean way, but more like in a funny way. It's like, hey, they can
Yeah.
see you everything, and I do mean everything. I don't know. It's a fun scenario. It's like it's playful enough without being overly mean, and there's that bit of like voyeurism. There's a bit of like gaining the confidence because I also like the part where it's like human really embarrassed about the whole situation, but then they like turning into something really cool and really pretty, really sexy even, and then they're like,
Mhm.
"Hey, I like this. Hey guys, check this out. I look awesome." Something like that. Again, keeping it like in a very playful tone, in a very lighthearted way, because that's how I tend to enjoy them. I can find all the fun in it for the most part.
Yeah. Oh no, I completely agree. I think one scenario that comes to mind that's in that vein that I mean, I guess it does still get some play to some degree, but I wish there was a bit more of when you have like a volunteer who comes up at like a magic show and then there's a TF.
Oh
I feel
yeah.
like there used to be more of them. There's definitely still some of them, but I always wish there was a bit more because like you said, if you have them like TFing in front of the audience, you know.
I've been meaning to get something like that at some point. I kept forgetting. Next time I
Yeah.
get the chance, either I do it myself or I get someone to do it. But I want to do the whole magician call someone on stage. We're gonna do a magic trick. I'm gonna show you this creature or whatever. And it's like, hey, come on stage. By the way, zap. Now you're naked, and now zap. You start changing.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. I think it's really cool to pair that with the vibes of like being immediately embarrassed and then by the end you're like, actually, this is great. This is how I am, like check it out.
Or they're like mildly grumpy about it at the end. It's just something
Oh,
like that.
yeah. It's like, yeah, I'm not embarrassed now. I'm just annoyed that like, like where am I gonna get new clothes now? Like, come on, like
You don't need them. Like
I
what?
guess that's true. You don't need them necessarily.
Depends on the
Oh,
end result.
yeah, absolutely. So I like all of those, and I hope people will take away that they should do more TFs in that vein because I think those situations are really cool. And I do also like, of course, the scientist who has to use their own invention on themselves because they're like, they've run out of grant money and they don't have any other options, and the only thing they can do to show the world that they're right is to use it themselves, and then TF ensues. I always love that.
Oh no, I couldn't get an approval for a test. I guess I'll have to do it myself.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that one does crop up a decent amount, but I wish there was more because I'm a sucker for that kind of a vibe. I think it's just a really funny situation, and like I also feel like there's a lot of people in like higher education who are like I relate to that almost a bit too much in terms of the not getting grants and all of that stuff. So maybe that's why there's not as much of it.
I
I
mean,
don't
I
know.
was in that situation in a completely different context, obviously, but something that I
Mhm.
was doing back at actually university. We were developing a thing, and we wanted to do a test,
Yeah.
and they couldn't get like they said no, you couldn't do a test with people because there's like a bunch of things to be signed. It was literally just a little web thing with a UI. Apparently, even exposing people to the UI was considered something that you need to sign a waiver for because of various reasons. Apparently, my UI was so bad I was going to give them eye cancer or something. I don't know. It's weird. It's a weird thing, but that's off topic.
Yeah, no, I get that. There's a lot of analogies I think that people can make to their own time in higher education if they've gone through it. So maybe that's why it doesn't come up as much. But I nonetheless enjoy it quite a bit, and I wish there was a bit more of it.
Cannot stop scientific progress. I will be the progress.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I love that stuff. Oh, awesome. So, I know we had a few audience questions, and I definitely wanted to make sure we had time to get to those. So the first one we have is from Fire, and Fire said or asked, if you were to be completely physically transformed, but your mind not touched, what do you feel the effect would be on your post TF still human mental state? Do you think you would continue to retain the same cognitive function, or do you think that the body's instincts and impulses would start to change how you think and act? And this is kind of great because it's touched on something we kind of mentioned earlier in the episode. So, what do you think about this one?
Kind of depends on what you're turning into and what kind of logic you want to apply. Because obviously
Hmm.
you can go with the logic of you change completely, but your mind is still human and nothing has changed besides maybe some minor things like I don't know, turn into a horse and you know how to run on all four without breaking your
Falling
neck
over, yeah.
because you
Yeah.
you fall over or whatever. Or like yeah, again, just being able to adapt to the body, or maybe just minor things like you grow up an appetite for grass if you're a horse or something, or licking
Yeah.
sugar cubes. Or you can go like the completely yeah, your mind is still a human, but now you're getting assaulted with like a million different instincts, thoughts, previous memories, depending on what you do. Like a lot of people like to do the whole Dragon TF where they suddenly gain like ancestral knowledge and they're like, I know time, space, and everything.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, you can even just go all the way and go full on Lovecraftian style, madness seeping in. Because actually, there's this funny analogy that I saw when people talk about H.P. Lovecraft, specifically with the cosmic horror and the whole madness thing. Someone actually did this analogy where they said that it's basically akin to an ant turning into a human, body and mind, so they like be able to act like a human, think like a human, operate
Hmm.
computers and whatnot. But then they turn back into an ant, yet they still retain all those memories. But now, because they have the brain of an ant, they don't know what those memories mean anymore. They just see things that they don't understand. They try to understand but fail because they're not equipped to understand them. And that's why they go insane. And that's what a lot of Lovecraftian stuff, for example, deals with. It's like when a human gains what they call cosmic knowledge, or like knowledge beyond what the human can handle, that's why they go insane, because they just don't know what to do with that knowledge. So you can just literally go that way. It's like turning to something that less equipped to deal with the complexity of the human mind, and then you just go all sorts of weird or just regresses. Or go for something more, and suddenly you're gaining knowledge that you're struggling to understand. Like, I don't know, you always pretend like dragons are much more advanced and know more and see more. But even on like a smaller scale, just like, I don't know, you have a different vision and you have to adapt to seeing different colors or seeing different things, smelling different things, feeling, you know. It's one of those things you can explore in so many ways that it's hard to really pinpoint, but depends on how you want to be mean to the person that changes.
Yeah.
If you want to cut them some slack and just have some fun with it, or just go like, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see everything, or you're a dog. You only think cuddles, go walkies, give me cookie kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which some people enjoy also. Like, they do enjoy the idea
yeah.
of turning into something a little bit more careless. Not careless as in like doing stupid shit, but more like don't have to deal with all the stress of like human life, where he's like, oh, bills, taxes, the future. And no, I just want to deal with like being my cat, sleeping on the freaking bed and doing nothing all day, and not having to worry about anything besides when do I get to eat, or when do I get the scratchies. You know?
Exactly. Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and I think to the question itself, I think it really just depends on how you want to approach that and what your kind of vibe is. I know that, like, from a personal perspective, if it's like a permanent TF, I kind of like it when the identity completely shifts over. So sure, like if you physically changed and then your mind was still like human or whatever, like you said, it depends on what that form is and how the mind then handles that, either like new, like higher knowledge, or like grapples with the fact that there is less in the way of knowledge to go around. And then it's just a matter of personal preference as to whether or not you want that to be a good thing that is accepted, or like a horrifying thing. So yeah, I don't think there's a standard way.
I mean, for myself, of course, if I had to fantasize about it, I would go for the maintaining the human mind, or at least something human comparable. I'm not exactly into the mind regression kind of thing, where it's like you turn into a horse and suddenly you cannot think like a human anymore, and you're like, not calling horses stupid. I'm just saying that.
No, I know what you mean. It's like it's not as appealing.
But like that just kind of comes across a little bit something that can be a bit frightening. So I wouldn't do well. Maybe like as a. If I was working with the like, if I went with the thought that it's something that's temporary, it's like an experiment kind of a deal, but not like a permanent thing. It's like I don't like the scenario where someone gets stuck and suddenly they just completely got mind wiped or similar.
Yeah.
Like, I prefer it where it's it doesn't end up with that kind of implications, because that can lead to so many issues, so to say.
Yeah, it can lead to some dark places, and some people can be into that, and some people are just not,
Yeah, exactly. Like if people are into that for either because they do enjoy it for one reason or another, or because it's used as a storytelling medium. Because obviously, if it is a storytelling piece, anything goes. It just depends on what the full story is and what the context ends up becoming. But of course, for the more like casual sort of, I just like a TF for the sake of having a TF, then I tend to stick to the implications that everything will be fine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So then the next question I have is from Ulysses Duckler, and Ulysses asks, if you could start one new popular trend in the TF community, what would it be and how would you sustain it?
I think we kind of already said that with the whole magician apprentice, magician volunteer on stage, the whole semi-public TFs with a bit of a voyeurism / experimentation sort of deal going on.
Yeah, I think we kind of did.
Yeah, because otherwise I don't know exactly what trend. I would say a proper trend, I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, I will throw in I mean, I don't know if this has ever been a trend that's really left, but like the like mischievous person who can change themselves, who is roaming around with a TF ray gun, kind of like your blue alien, like that is a definitely a trend that I would love to see like just become a constant thing, like close to the tier of like hoop TFs. But I mean that already exists, so
Yeah, I have a monopoly over it.
yeah.
No, not really. But that's also one thing to that would be fun to see more. But it's already I already do see it. But
Yeah, yeah,
hey,
exactly.
I think for anything you always say there could always be more of this and that because there's things that we like, there's specific scenarios that really resonate that we like. We just want to see people explore them more or do more or just give us something more to look at.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the only other thing I would mention, I guess, yeah, it's something that exists already, but I would like to see more of. There was a trend back in the day of like having specific characters who would do kind of like they were always human themselves, and then they would do mischievous changes to others, and like the question of permanence would be left up as a question to the reader, because these were often through stories. I really like that kind of trope as well, but again, that does exist out there, so it's not like a new thing. But I mean, hey, I would like to see more of that, and I'd be happy if that was like a new trend that was like going on and people were engaging with it. So,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. And then the last question, which is actually kind of just I guess a question to me, comes from Postal Rue, who says, out of curiosity, is there a schedule or a queue of who is being interviewed each week? So the answer to that is no for now. We did actually run a poll on Twitter, asking if people would be interested in a Patreon. And to be clear, I would never ever paywall any episodes because I don't think that's appropriate for this kind of thing. But if we do start a Patreon, we might like give a peek under the hood in terms of who we're planning to have on. But as it stands right now, we don't really do that in a public way. It's more planning just on my end of who to reach out for and who's down for it and who isn't and that sort of stuff. But stay tuned. That might be something that changes in the future.
What he said.
Um, but yeah, that was all the audience questions I had. I was curious to know if you had any questions for me.
Uh, why a Lombax?
That's a great question. I love that question. To be completely frank, I don't know if I've actually like told the full story before on here, but
Go ahead.
I went through a few different sonas. I was a wolf first and foremost because it was like the classic thing back in the aughts.
It's the
And
first
then I
starter pack,
was
yeah.
yeah, oh 100%. And then I actually had a cheetah because I've always liked felines in general, and my partner at the time really just thought I fit it, and I kind of just like ran with it, huh? And then after a while, like we also like broke up, and I was like, I don't know how like I feel about this one anymore. So then I kind of like waffled between a few things. I was a lynx for a bit, I was a shark for a bit, and then I settled on Lombax. And honestly, the main reason why I settled on it was, first of all, it was still in my opinion, Lombaxes are kind of a feline. They're basically space cats, so that really helped. I love the big ears. I had a connection to big ears from my lynx, and I wanted something that had a bigger tail than a lynx because the lynx they have nubby tails, which is cute, but like I like longer tails. And so at the time I was actually between Snep and Lombax, but I ended up going with Lombax because of the ears, and also just in general. Like, I really like the video game series, but more important than that, I felt a bit of a personal connection to the story that the games had been telling about Ratchet and like his kind of like journey through life. And so I think that kind of resonated with me in a way that was just stronger than like some of the other options I had been considering at the time. And then there's the added bonus of within the video games, Ratchet oftentimes has TF guns, and that really spoke to me. Like they have, there's one device that's called the Sheepinator, where you literally
Yeah, I
just turn
remember. I
enemies into
recall.
sheep. that one is great. There was like the pixelizer, which is like you turn people into like a 2D version of themselves, which I think is also wild. And like a few other, I think there was like a monkey ray gun at one point. There's been a number of like TF guns in that game, and so I think that really solidified it for me in my mind because I like the idea of being a mischievous little space cat who can also TF others and also can be TF. And
Yep.
I think that their design is really cool, not only just with the ears because there's like no obvious ear hole, so it's kind of an interesting question as to how the hearing works, but also they have really unique feet, which I really appreciate. They're like not at all like Earth terrestrial cats in the sense that
Yeah,
it's
they're not
like
feline at all. It's just
yeah, yeah, they're not. They're just two massive claws where there should be toes and then one on the side, and that's it.
it's like cloven hooves but claws. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So yeah, that was basically the short and long of why Lombax. And honestly, I really like even like the newer editions. Like there was the new game with Rivet, and so they introduced a newer like spin on the design with the tail and everything, and I thought that was really cool too. So yeah, I just like I feel like I have a unique connection to them, and also there is a connection through that species directly to TF, and that just really spoke to me.
And it is fitting.
Thank you.
I mean, it's one of those things. Whenever, to be fair, when I say fitting, it's usually because I listen to someone's voice or the way they act, and I look at their song, and I'm like, yeah, that seemed to suit you. So it's a bit of an instinctual thing, but also because that's always. I mean, that's the way I've seen you from the start. Because
Mhm.
yeah, so that's why I say fitting.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and I definitely think my voice matches like the voice of what would come out of like a Lombax character in a video game. So
That for
I
sure.
definitely agree there.
That it
Yeah,
does.
and thank you. And yeah, it feels right, and I'm very pleased with it. And also, there's very few of them online within the TF space. I know of like two other Lombaxes who are like into TF, and I am the most commonly cited example. So I take a little bit of pride in like repping Lombaxes within transformation spaces. So it's kind of a thing now. Like I'm gonna stick with it. I think for a good long
Yeah,
time.
wear it with pride.
Absolutely.
Be it with pride. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, 100%. That was all I kind of had for today, but I was really glad that you were down to come on, and I really enjoyed chatting with you and talking about TF.
It's been a pleasure. I know I rambled on a bit at random sometimes, but I've never been on a podcast before, so I don't know how to work that out. But hey, it's been fun.
Yeah, I think you've done great, and I
Thank
think
you.
that, you were very much a natural when it came to talk about these topics, so I always appreciate that in a guest.
I don't know about that, but yeah, it's a topic that I enjoy, so I can talk about it.
Yeah, it's a good time. Well, awesome. Well, then, before we go, if folks are looking for more of your stuff online, where can they find you?
Primarily, it's gonna be on for Affinity and Twitter. It's always Ben300 in both, so it's easy to find. Even though I think I got shadow banned on Twitter, so you have to like type in the name manually because Twitter logic. I don't know. To be fair, word of warning: there's a lot of non-safe for work content on both accounts. So I mean, on FA you can turn on filter, but on Twitter you might be seeing that stuff regardless because I don't know if I tagged everything properly. But watch at your own risk. If not, I don't know, follow other people's retweets.
Yeah. No, that definitely works too, and I think that yeah, it's nice that FA has those filters. So like, if you don't want to see not safe for work stuff, FA is a good alternative to keep it nice and PG-13. So
Aye, exactly.
awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming on, and thank you so much to everyone for listening. I hope y'all had an enjoyable time listening to this, as much as a good time as I did recording it. We will be back next week with more wonderful TF content, and in the meantime, I hope y'all have a good week. Get some rest. You probably need more sleep. Stay hydrated, keep an open mind, and stay TFy. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye, everybody.